Welcome, everybody, to the Jess Berry podcast. Today, we have Ulysses Lopez joining us. This conversation is going to be for people who have survived hard things and are ready to move forward. Ulysses is the executive director and co-founder of the IA mission, which focuses on expanding psychedelic therapy for veterans. He's also a decorated U.S. Army combat veteran with 9 years of service. He is Ranger qualified and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. After his military career, he improved veteran care as a program analyst at the VA. He's also an avid backpacker and valedictorian at Gateway Community College. All right, welcome, Ulysses.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jess. Well, I feel honored that I'm your first guest doing an interview, a live stream. And wow, thank you for the introduction. That was fantastic. Before we start, I'd like to do something with you, an exercise. Let's go ahead and take 3 deep breaths, hold it in and let it out. So when we take that first deep one, once we filled up our lungs as much as we can, we're going to try to take a little bit more and then let it out slowly. We'll take 3. Okay. You ready?
Yes.
Ready? Let's go. Ready? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Trying to calm my nerves a little bit. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. I also have questions for you. I know that you competed this weekend and I'm excited to hear about that. Thank you for having me this morning.
Thank you so much for being willing to hop on here and share more about yourself and being vulnerable with what you're doing and helping other veterans. I know we met earlier. Man, was that just like a few weeks ago? Yeah, man, this year's flying by already. But
Yeah, it's interesting because J-Mac, right? I mean, that guy, he connects people. He knows how to bring people together, and so he kept talking about you. He said, "Hey, you need to meet this person, Jess Berry. She does jiu-jitsu. She's a martial artist. She's like on your wavelength, Yuli. You got to check her out." And it was awesome to meet you there and share the stage with you at the USA Veteran Village of 2025. So that was awesome.
yeah, 100%. I feel like you're one of those people where after I've met them once or had one conversation, it's like, oh, like I've known you for a long time. Like, you just have such a depth to you, and you're very genuine.
Thank you.
I really
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm excited to dive in here a little bit. First of all, I want to give you the chance to introduce the IA mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's super cool that you let me talk about the IA mission a little bit here. In short, in Arizona, we're growing public interest in psychedelics and religious freedom laws such as the Arizona Revised Statute 41-1493.01 shaped the broader landscape. Many veterans seek non-traditional paths to address PTSD, depression, moral injury, often without adequate support. The IA mission exists to reduce the risks veterans face in that search. We are not part of the psychedelic tourism space, and we do not administer or handle the substances. Instead, we operate through a veteran-centered harm reduction model supported by 22 veterans at a time through a twice-yearly retreat built around preparation, peer support, and integration. Each participant is paired with a trained battle buddy and supported by coaching, counseling, and on-site medical staff to ensure safety, accountability, and continuity of care so veterans are never navigating these experiences alone. And that's kind of the nut and bolts of the IA mission. Many times, folks reach out to me directly, and they're, with the assumption that we are the ones that are handling the medicine and we are the ones administering the medicine and we are the plug. That's just not true. Right. The IA mission exists because there are a vast amount of Americans that have exhausted all means of mental health and are seeking these substances, whether it's ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, dimethyltryptamine, DMT, MDMA, ketamine, and they're navigating these spaces on their own. Now, yes, we have ketamine clinics, and as many of you might not know, but the VA also offers ketamine treatment as well as MDMA in select sites across the nation. But many veterans, they already have a distrust for the Department of Veterans Affairs because of their service, just left a bad taste in their mouth, right? And so these veterans are buying these substances illegally, not verified, not vetted, not understanding if it's laced or not, and they're going home and they're taking these powerful substances. And when they come out on the other end, that neuronal plasticity, the brain they're very susceptible to influence, very emotional, not really understanding what's happening to their body. And most importantly, not having that professional support. to allow them to maximize their healing. And so many times by doing these substances on your own, you actually do more harm to yourself than not. A couple examples. I've known veterans personally that taken strong substances on their own, and they're in this state of afterglow, as we call it, that a peak of neuronal plasticity, and they have this unrealistic view of their capabilities, and they just have all these grand ideas, and they make permanent decisions that 2 weeks, a month after, when their feet finally land on the ground, they're like, oh man, what did I do? I've committed to this, right? I made all these commitments. And the I Am mission is here because those cohorts need assistance. And so what we do is we capture that cohort that's already choosing to sit with psychedelic medicine, and we offer psychedelic assisted coaching, integration, preparation, and we do it in a safe manner, making sure that as we ramp up, right, for that ceremony that they chose to attend, we're providing them with the workbooks, that and exercises that we do as a group and with virtual sessions, right? And then after the fact, after the ceremony, we provide them with another ebook and with virtual meetings to really like hone in on their integration. Okay, this is what I got out of my ceremony, out of my experience, and this is the plan of action that I'm going to that I'm going to execute to achieve my activities of daily living, like to maximize who I am as a person. And so that's where the I mission comes from. That's exactly what we focus on. We have this, like I mentioned, a peer-centered harm reduction model peer-led veteran-centered harm reduction model that really focuses in the holistic approach of well-being, of the well-being of the veteran. So with that being said, the I Am mission is not exclusive to just veterans, those who wore a uniform. The way that we approach our cohort is that we are primarily looking at veterans. However, we also consider dependents, caregivers, and survivors, right? You might be a relative. You might have somebody close that happens to be a veteran. We will make that decision if it's something that you fit in with the group that we're putting together for this upcoming ceremony. Additionally, with that harm reduction model, the I Am mission is like we aim to reduce the financial barrier to access these therapies. Like we believe that it's really unfair that Americans have to save thousands of dollars just to go outside the country and receive these therapies. And again, often with no preparation, often with no plan on coming back. Although I will say that there are many retreats that do their best to make sure that we have a plan in place, right? But the I mission, again, the second thing we do is we remove that financial barrier to access those therapies because they're already available domestically here in the United States. You don't have to break the bank. I mean, the average American can't afford a $400 emergency. So what we're going to go ahead and price them out of healing, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned that people are already doing this, but your foundation like provides the opportunity to do it in a safer, more supportive community and a way to
Absolutely.
integrate that. What are some real life examples that you can share of the impact that you guys have been having with veterans?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share a couple of good examples. A recent example, I had a participant reach out to me, and he also reached out to the group. We keep this ongoing community on Signal where folks can continue to bond and build relationships because they're bonding because of their experience. But this person hadn't spoken to his family, his parents, in more than 7 years. And after ceremony, right, the first ayahuasca ceremony, for example, it really turns the key and opens the door. The second ceremony, you walk through that door, and finally that third ceremony, on that third day, you're really exploring the depth of that room. And that's exactly how he described it as well, and did a lot of searching within. And he messaged me, around Christmas time, and he said, "Hey, man, I hadn't seen and spoken to my family in 7 years. And this was the first year that I did it right after our ceremony, right? A month after that Veterans Day ceremony. It was beautiful. Another example is we had a participant who was a first sergeant with the 82nd Airborne Division. His brother joined the military because of him. He looked up to his brother. They were deployed in combat. And during a combat operation, they were deployed in Afghanistan, during a combat operation, the younger brother got killed in a firefight. For our participant, he hadn't felt that. He said this happened years ago and he had just swallowed it and just put it to the side and didn't even, and this guy was very stoic, funny guy as well when needed, very witty, but, didn't show a lot of emotion. And again, first night, turn the key, second night, open the door. That third night, you walk and explore the depth of that room. And, at the end of ceremony, when he was leaving, he gave me a strong hug and he said, this is the first time he's felt things inside that since he could remember. And then, now periodically he'll reach out to me and he'll kind of check in and say, oh my good, my life hasn't been as beautiful as it is now. And he mentioned that it was the first time he was able to feel vulnerable and really like emote to his spouse, which I thought was absolutely beautiful. Cool thing too is that he recommended two of his buddies to our program, and they went through it this last ceremony, which I thought was really really cool. And another example, and I'll say the last one. I'll just use myself as an example. Getting out the military is always a hard transition. Getting out, when you're so busy, you don't get time to contemplate the things and process the emotions you went through. And I remember getting out and going straight into school and not really having time to breathe. And during the quiet moments, it was difficult to quiet the gunfire in my head. And I was experiencing suicidal ideation. It was really bad. And so I wasn't doing well. I was in addiction. It was just terrible. And then on top of that, I wasn't the father that I needed to be to my son. Right. And because of ayahuasca, right, I was able to kick all those substances. I was able to rebuild my relationship with my son. Now I have a beautiful wife, a child on the way, a beautiful 3-year-old, have a fantastic career where I get to help veterans at a higher level and at a large scale, excuse me. And most importantly, with the IA mission, I'm part of something meaningful, something that gives not only myself purpose, but allows those people that are inspired to help their brothers and sisters. Again, we say in the IA mission, I am, as you are, our brothers and sisters keeper. So there's just a couple of examples, but there's tons of them. You could see we had members go on podcasts. If you go to www.theiamission.org and you go under our impact, we're slowly updating it. We're actually updating the website, modernizing it a little bit, but you'll hear stories of people and how they've used our program to catalyze their success.
We'll put the links in the show notes for people so they can check that out. I think it's important. You mentioned with your own story, there was that moment of choice. Like you had experienced a lot of really hard things, and then they were affecting you negatively. And I think it's easy for people to get stuck in that way of being, or that negative mindset, or just perpetuating those behaviors that are no longer serving them. What contributed to you making that decision that you were done and you were going to really invest in yourself and your healing?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I think that it really came to understanding the power of the mind and the power of your emotions. Understanding that as Joe Dispenza says, in order to change your personal reality, you must change your personality, and it all starts with intention. There's a great quote that I'm a big fan of. Thoughts are seeds that blossom into action. Once I understood that this negative self-talk and just continuously feeling sorry for myself, I was just perpetuating the cycle of depression, anxiety, of negativity. I read recently that there's these chemicals get released, right? When we feel a certain way, when we feel angry, when we feel anxious, these chemicals get released. And unfortunately for many people, that becomes their baseline state of being. So you have very neurotic, negative people that are just used to picking a fight or used to arguing because they're addicted to those emotions. And it's because growing up, many of us, we incur trauma as we grow. So it's just that they were instilled in that state as being normal in their baseline. And me understanding that, I was like, hey, not only and this is because of the medicine, it helped me really see and open up my eyes. Like, first of all, I created a strong relationship with my providers at the Department of Veterans Affairs at the VA. I ensured that I knew my rights, my rights and my responsibilities when I communicated with my provider. So safe to say, I made sure that I recruited that professional help by saying, hey, I need to speak to somebody about my experiences. And then second, really understanding that your mindset, right? Your mindset is the most important thing. If you want to change your life, you got to start by changing your mind. And, for me, and I think this might be the same for you and many martial artists out there and people that are like that use fitness as their catalyst to healing, right? It's that there's a famous quote. I forget who the person said it. Potentially, I think it might be Epictetus. People listening in the chat, can you guys please correct it? But it's that you put your body through vigorous training so the body stays disciplined to the mind. Right. And so it's absolutely true. Right. If you want to change your mindset, it has to start with discipline and really looking internally and sitting in those quiet moments and kind of unpacking what your life is going through, having that reflection. Right. And then most importantly, if you're having trouble doing that, do a little bit of PT, get on the mats, do a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu. Right. Because I promise you develop the habit of staying active, fit, and pushing your body, your mind is going to follow. Many reasons why we give up, the many reasons why some of us are lazy is because we allow our body and our feelings dictate our decisions. No, what we have to do is we want to make sure the most important thing is discipline. Motivation or not, discipline needs to be there. You need to keep a promise to yourself. And so, just really understanding that. And I had an interview recently on the Good in the Head podcast, and we talked about how books, and it's true, just to kind of add to your question here, to answer your question a little more in depth, but books as well, right? Just to briefly for your viewers, when I took the gunshot wound in my chest and I was in a coma for 2 weeks, I lost a lot of blood. I had brain damage. So I had to relearn how to read, and it took about 8 months to get back. And I fell in love with reading because of it. Because, once you lose something, you really learn to appreciate it. But in that appreciation, I started understanding books as building relationships with those authors. In fact, I have some of my favorite books, and I've highlighted portions of books. And sometimes when I need to solve a problem, I'm a huge advocate for mentors, but your books can be mentors. Right? And I'll go and I'll read some chapters, something to kind of help me solve my problem, or at least unpack what's going on.
I'm somebody who's been highlighting stuff in books for a long time too. I think I saw my mom doing it as I grew up, but I was just thinking about how like life is kind of like a book. We have different chapters going. There's people that come in and out, different chapters, and I think it's easy to highlight like the negative experiences in our chapters sometimes, and we just draw our focus and attention to that. But when I like read a physical book, I'm highlighting the stuff that I like, that speaks to my soul, that stands out, that feels in alignment with who I am. And so I think just like transferring that into our daily life, like what are you highlighting at the end of every day? What are you choosing to focus on? What do you want more of in your life? I think that could be helpful for
Absolutely. I think, like, are you a fan of journaling? And not everybody is,
yeah.
but yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, perfect. Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. So that's exactly it. Like, kind of when I was mentioning, you can do that through meditation. I love to meditate, but you can do all those things. But in order to really unpack your experiences throughout the day, you really have to take time to journal, kind of write those down, build a relationship with yourself. I mean, honestly, the most important person that your most important fan, the most important person in your life, the most important person you keep a promise to is always going to be yourself. But many people are distracted by external stimulus, whatever that is, whether it's social media, whether it's being addicted to this or that or the other, and they don't take time to really sit with what's inside them and having that relationship and that conversation, right? I want to touch on something you said, that your life is like a book, and we kind of have you can feel when a chapter is closing in your life. Many people feel that. But at the same time, many people don't know when it's time to close a chapter in their life. And they get stuck in that chapter one, and they don't ever move forward because they're holding on to something for whatever reason. Like, I find that many people, and closing that chapter is also changing who you are. And many people, they fear closing that chapter for two things. It's because they don't know what's on the other side, right? And then number two is because they are beholden to the perceptions and views and opinions of others, instead of actually seeing that, hey, I'm the most important person in my reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I think also like that, like a lack of self-belief can really keep you stuck in the past as well, because, it ties into that fear of the unknown. And, unless you believe that you can be more, that you can be better, then you're going to be stuck. I was having a
Yeah,
conversation with Princeton Clark the other day. He was he's a big motivational speaker, and he mentioned how your brain's kind of like a computer. It's programmed with what you've given it, and so if you don't give your brain like more information, that something it hasn't experienced yet, then you're not going to believe it's possible. So that's why like the visualization is such a big part
absolutely.
for progressing in your life, and giving your brain that the images or the just all the stuff to believe
Yeah.
that something else is possible, even if you haven't experienced it yet.
Well said, sister. Yeah, I want to point out a study. I'm going to butcher it, but again, for the viewers, please place it in the chat. But basically, your brain doesn't understand what's actually really happening or what's happening in your head. So the power of visualization is absolutely important, because it's starting to rewire your brain to think differently, to be differently, to act differently, to speak differently, all that. And it starts by visualizing and kind of having that positive self-talk. When you're absolutely right, many people are stuck in a perpetual cycle of negative self-talk, right? And really being down on themselves. It's what's interesting is that everything you ever wanted, everything that you ever thought would be like would maximize your life and say, hey, that's what I want. It's on the other side of things you don't want to do. It's on the other side of embarrassment. It's on the other side of taking a risk, and you have to do that, right? You have to do that for yourself. And most importantly, like I was mentioning, you want to have that promise to yourself. But most importantly, it's because if you say you're going to do something and you break that word, you're disrespecting yourself and you're making it easier for you not to keep your word for other people. So I'll give you a recent example. I was talking to, and this is a recent example. I was talking to one of my buddies. We went on a hike. We have this group that gets together every couple of months, and we go on a hike in the backcountry of Arizona. And I simply just made a comment that, hey, the water was below 30 degrees. So, and I love to cold plunge, but it was early in the morning. It was still warm. And I mentioned, hey, I'm going to jump in the water. Right. And I said it in jest. And because I said it, I'm going to do it. Right. And that's the same thing for me. If I say, hey, I'm going to, like this podcast, right? I made a commitment that I was going to be here. I have a lot I need to do. And in hindsight, I was like, well, I have my schedule's kind of backed up, but I made my promise. Yeah. I didn't have time to prepare for this interview, but I thought it's Jess Berry. Like she literally just went in a competition, put herself on the line, and she's like, yeah, let's do this podcast. I'm just feeling sorry for myself because I have to submit some freaking reports and there's a lot of research involved. Nah, I can do this.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
well, talking about the competition in jiu-jitsu, I want to get into your story with jiu-jitsu a little bit, because I know
yeah,
you mentioned that it helped with your healing process, but it also caused you some
yeah.
issues with your mental health.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So the way that I got into jiu-jitsu, believe it or not, it was so I grew up boxing and wrestling. I wrestled in high school, and I was always around that type of culture, right? Growing up in South Phoenix, there was a big wrestling culture there. And then of course I always loved the kung fu movies, but I never really had the chance to practice extensively as a youth because we didn't have the money. And so when I got into the army, I got introduced to our modern army combatives, MACP, right? And this was a Gracie based combat system. And so we would, especially in the 82nd Airborne Division, combatives is such a huge culture there. My second deployment, I got wounded a second time. It was just a little bit of shrapnel, little scratches on my leg, but it was enough for my battalion commander to say, "Hey, that's two Purple Hearts. You need a break. You need to get a job somewhere." And he said, "I don't care where you go, but you need to get off the line, right? The infantry line." And so he recommended that I go to the jump master school and become a black hat there, but I didn't want to. One of my NCOs from my previous deployment was the head NCO, non-commissioned officer of the fight school at Fort Bragg. And I said, hey man, I'm getting kicked out of battalion and they're asking me to sit this next deployment out. Do you have a job for me? And he said, well, yeah, but you have to compete. You have to go through level 1 and 2. And I went through level 1 and 2. I made it to the finals both. And in both times I got beat by my buddy Andrew Godel, sick ass collegiate wrestler. But ultimately between him and I'm the one that got selected to be an instructor. And I was just doing it because, hey, I've always wanted to try martial arts. Well, when I got to Fort Bragg as a combatives instructor, absolutely loved it. One of the best chapters of my military career. They sent you to, I was 1 and 2. Eventually I went to level 3 and 4, but the culture there was at 6:30 you're training from 11:30 to 1 p.m. and then you're training from 6 to 8 o'clock every day. And we were trained at this MMA gym called Team Rock. It was a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu school as well. It was a under Hoist Gracie and Greg Thompson. And so that's when I got into jiu-jitsu. One thing what really got me deep into jiu-jitsu is that as a combatives instructor, you also learn how to strike and throw and wrestle. But because of my gunshot wound, I have compromised scalene muscles. It's not really strong. So when I was striking, I would get hit really hard and it would just shut my arm off. And so I started really getting into jiu-jitsu because I knew that I could grab, I can slow things down. It's not as violent, if you will, right? And it won't jerk my neck back. And on top of that, the 82nd, if you're an instructor, they pay for you to compete. And so not only were we training three times a day, but whenever there was a Naga or a new breed or some type of tournament up and down the East Coast, they would, hey, Ulysses, Jesse, Lance, you guys are going to compete. And we would go and compete. And that really got me addicted to what jiu-jitsu was, right? I got my blue belt after a year, and then I got my purple belt, I think just at 2 years because we were training so frequently, so back to back, right? when I got out of the army, right, I got out as a purple belt, and I was training in Tempe with Gustavo Dantas. And I remember I had this great conversation with him the first time that I trained at his gym. He noticed that I was a veteran, and I did the 10 a.m. class. And after the class, we talked for about an hour and a half. And he recommended this book, to your point, about the brain being a supercomputer. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And exactly that. He states that the brain is a supercomputer, garbage in, garbage out, right? And so you want to program it with things that make you better, right? And so that was one of my first directions towards kind of self-improvement, but I didn't really heed that. Instead, I doubled down on jiu-jitsu. I would train, I would train, I would train. And eventually what happened was it was a Naga tournament. I forget what year. I think this was maybe 2018 or 2017. And, when I was in the East Coast, I was winning my white belts and my purple belt tournaments, right? And I was like solid. I got here as a purple belt. I was doing great. But then I started losing tournaments and I was just losing them. And it was just, I would train, but I felt really, really weak. It turns out that I had stage 3, borderline stage 4 thyroid cancer that had already spread through my lymph nodes. And that thyroid cancer actually was plummeting my hormones, my testosterone, like all these hormones that were being affected because of the cancer. And this is why it was difficult for me to like get trained. I would even cut down to make sure that I was bigger and stronger, and I just always felt so weak. And it just turns out that it was the actual cancer. So what ended up happening is that I kept training. I went through the cancer treatment. I kept training. I got my brown belt. I earned my brown belt under Tanquino Mendez and Tiago Jimenez, and then I earned my black belt a couple years later from Tiago Jimenez. But in between that time, I hit a really bad cycle of depression. And the reason why I hit that cycle of depression is because this is how jujitsu, it can be harmful. The way that jujitsu, and it's not just jujitsu, it's just in my case, it's jujitsu, but it could be badminton, it could be competitive basket weaving, it could even be the psychedelic space, which many times it is. But it's that when you're not part of a community, when you don't feel wanted, you're going to gravitate towards something. And then that becomes your identity. Everything is that. Everything is this. Everything is going to be jujitsu. You train all the time. You want to compete. You want to be a world champion. You want to do all that. And that's kind of that is the identity that I had back in 2017 and 2018. And I, I knew that my self-worth really plummeted right around that time because I couldn't train as like I wanted to, and I can't compete and I can't be a world champion. I can't do those things because of my hormonal and physical limitations, because of the cancer, because of the gunshot wound missing a portion of my lung, all that stuff, because of the back and knee issues. I have over 100 jumps out of an airplane with the 82nd. And so the way that it tanked, it took me in the cycle of depression because everything of my entire identity became that. It was a turning point for me when my father passed away. He passed away in 2018. And when he passed away, I had to grow up. I had 2 little brothers in Mexico that now did not have somebody to provide for them. And I wasn't close to my little brothers. I didn't really know them. My dad had separated himself from the family, but now these little boys don't have anyone. They don't have anyone to take care of them. And so, I had dreams and aspirations of opening a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym and teaching. I love doing that. I love training. Would train with my kid, but that's not going to it's not going to help my little brothers, immediately. And it's not going to help my son. And that really, really hurt that, hey, you know what, this is a forcing of closing that chapter. And so like to kind of close that, the way that and this, again, it's not just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it's many things, is that if you don't have, a core foundation at home, whether that's your immediate family, your spouse, or your extended family, you're going to gravitate towards something, and that thing is going to be your identity, your character. And guess what? Not everybody's meant to be a world champion. Not everyone's meant to be a superhero. Not everybody's meant to do that. And when that doesn't happen for you, it can be devastating. Part of the IA mission, what we do is we build a community, right? We let them know that, hey, the IA mission is not the end all be all. The community of the brotherhood and sisterhood that we're building, we're always going to be there. But most importantly, you need to take care of your foundation at home. You need to, build those roots, right? Nurture those relationships, get that help that you need, right? Because ultimately your mental health is your responsibility. And to kind of close that, going back to your beautiful example of closing a chapter in a book, sometimes not letting go can do more harm than good, right? And that was my case initially, right? I didn't want to let go even after the diagnosis, and I will still try to train hard to my detriment. It made my neck and my body worse. I have a couple labral tears in my hips, but I just kept pushing and pushing. And it wasn't until, a couple of things. It wasn't until I realized that no one's expecting me to be a fucking world champion. Nobody's expecting me to do those things. Those are those unrealistic expectations that I put in myself. And because I'm trying to prove to everybody else that I'm this or I'm that, when ultimately all I have to do is prove it to myself. And today I still have a great relationship with my coach. I can text and call him. I can go to drop into an open mat if I want to. He's a really good dude. And like, most importantly, he helped me understand that, because of course there was some insecurity. Hey, I didn't even compete as a brown belt when I first got my black belt. I didn't even compete as a brown belt. I don't deserve this, coach. And he would always tell me and I remember having this conversation outside the gym with him. He said, Ulysses, it's not about competition. It's not about that. It's about your character and who you are as a person, who you are in the mat, the way that you mentor the younger belts, the younger students, the way that you carry yourself. You are an example of perseverance, and that in itself is the mindset. And so, that helped me heal in many ways, because ultimately Tiago was basically saying, like, dude, no one's expecting anything. I just want your friendship. I don't want anything out of you. I just want your friendship, and I just want you to be happy. I'm rooting for you.
That's beautiful. I think bringing that emphasis back into like who you are as a person and less on the external part of things is really important. I think we all get caught up in placing our value or whether we're worthy or deserving of this or that on what we've done instead of like who we are.
Correct.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on a little bit on your backpacking experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us some of the places that you've been and like what you love about backpacking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's really cool because some of the best places, most beautiful places that I've been backpacking, it was kind of forced. When you're deploying, you got to walk miles and miles and miles. But I felt you know this, you're in the military, right?
Hmm.
And you do they make you guys ruck still? Like, are you still
Every
every
so
so
often
often?
we do.
Every so
Yeah.
often, right? So after the military, I had a lot of healing. I had a lot of healing to do, my back, my knees, and all that stuff. And it wasn't until I would say about 4 years ago, I started getting heavy into backpacking. Before then, I love to off-road and overland, explore the backcountry of Arizona, California, New Mexico, wherever, Utah, explore that. But it wasn't scratching that itch, right? It wasn't until I started, especially my son, so the reason why we were backpacking is because Dominic, my 17-year-old now, he was too young to carry a lot of weight, and so once he hit about 14, 15 years old, his testosterone really started spiking. And so he's able to kind of keep up with me, and go backpacking. So I'll tell you a most recent one, a recent one that we did that was really like, it filled my heart, was we did a cabin loop on the Mogollon Rim. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Cabin Loop, right? So Cabin Loop, it's a 28 miles. We decided to do that over 4 days so we can take our time. And what was really cool is that we went last summer and there was a drought. So my son and I, we did some research, and this is why I love backpacking. We did some research and we found, hey, there's going to be water at Coyote Springs, and then potentially there's going to be water at Dane Springs, and then we've developed a plan. We had our packing list, we had our water, we had our food. We made sure that we knew that at this point we were going to have some water. And so the thing is that we walked, it was really hot. We stepped off in mid morning, because the plan was by the time we get to about Coyote Springs, about 8 to 10 miles in, the sun's going to be going down, and then we can fill up and get some rest. And so we get to Coyote Springs, there's a drought, there is no water. And so we're running out of water, but we made a plan. We said, hey, we measured it. We were actually about 13 miles in, and it's a 28 mile loop. And we made the plan. Hey, we're going to get to Dane Springs. If there is no water there, then we're going to have to eat the entire 15 miles and go all the way around. And that's it. It is what it is. We'll survive. It's going to suck.
Yeah.
But having that mindset with my kid, like explaining, having a plan, he was like, okay, Dad, we get to Dane Springs, there is water, and we get to take our time for the rest of the trip. Another beautiful, and then with the Mogollon Rim, it's so close, it's so beautiful. You are absolutely remote. You definitely want to be prepared because there are bear and there's wild animals out there. So you want to make sure you're prepared. Another recent one that we did, and that's the beautiful thing about the veteran culture, is that these groups come to like-minded people come together to do awesome things. And so I was invited on this backpacking trip doing the Virgin River at Mount Zion. We did from the top all the way to the bottom. It wasn't bad. It was 17 miles. And we did that over 2 days. But what sucked was the boulders that you were walking on, but the scenery. And then, of course, spending time with my son, right? Having those conversations, right? And then, of course, two more that I want to recommend. I mean, I could give you tons of examples, but two more that I like to mention. Bright Angel Campground. We've gone down to the Bright Angel Campground. We were planning on doing the rim to rim this March, but unfortunately, what it says online is the North Rim is closed because of the fires last year. So we're more than likely going to go down South Kaibab, stay at Bright Angel for 2 days, and then come up Bright Angel Trailhead, and then Havasupai Falls. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely stunning. And I'll tell you a little more about Havasupai Falls in a bit. But my whole point when I gave you these examples of these backpacking trips is that it's an opportunity to disconnect from the world and reconnect with my son. And every backpacking trip I've done since he's been 14, now he's 17, he's always been at my side because it gives me an opportunity to have these deep conversations with my son. He's completely separated. We have no reception, and I'm able to really peer into his soul, and he's able to peer into mine. And it's absolutely, absolutely stunning to see that and nurture that relationship. Like I was mentioning, the Havasupai Falls, that trip as of right now would be the best one because of the experiences that I shared with my son. Right, first of all, we carried everything down there. Again, our packs are between 40 to 60 pounds, depending on the backpacking trip and what we need. But we were able to take our packs, go all the way down. On the first day, we walked 17 miles. We went all the way to Mooney Falls. It's about 200 feet. We climbed down with our packs all the way to the bottom, never doing that again. As I was going on the bottom, as we were climbing down, I created a rig so he can clip himself on the chain as he goes down. So if he falls, he's good. But it was, if you slip, you're done, right? And so we were able to make it down to the bottom safely. And we went all the way down to, I think it was called Beaver Falls, I think is the last waterfall in the Havasu area. And we were able to set up our little living area. We created our campsite down there. And we had wild rams, literally 10, 15 feet from us, just watching us. That 4-day trip with my son, just exploring every waterfall. And not only that, but, we got to know some of the people, just ran into them and had a conversation. It was absolutely beautiful. But the thing with backpacking that I absolutely like, it kind of combines everything I love to do, right? First of all, in order to be happy, you got to do challenging things. Backpacking is challenging. You really have to prepare, right? We're going backpacking March 7th through the 11th, right? And so, I know I got to train and I got to be ready because, I got to make sure I have strong hips, strong back, good to go. But that exertion of energy, pushing yourself, it's absolutely great. And then having the opportunity to bond with my child and speak to him, that's fantastic. And most importantly, uninterrupted time so I can really enjoy a book and then maybe write, extensively and kind of be centered and really peer into myself. It feels like the more I go out into nature, the deeper I can go into myself. So there's just kind of a couple of examples of backpacking trips, but yeah, it's something I love to do. I try to get 2 in a year.
I love how you said the more you get out in nature, the deeper you can connect with yourself. I think that's so true. I have done a lot of women's retreats and facilitated those in northern Arizona, and yeah, it's just beautiful to witness people slowing down, being still, giving themselves permission to just sit with themselves and do that. I encourage them to do that with a space of non-judgment and just curiosity and noticing what comes up, and it's okay, whatever comes up. You're meant to meet that emotion or thought at that time. And so
Yeah.
I think being out in nature really allows you to actually hold space for that.
Yeah.
With yourself.
That's why I'm a fan of yours, Jess, because of that perspective and that mindset. It's absolutely powerful. And then most importantly too is that you are a refreshing voice in a world that's dominated by ego. You're very humble, right? You said, "Hey, I'm competing this weekend, but it's, and I'm doing great." I look on your social and you won a belt, you got a medal around your neck, like you're obviously a stud, right? But your
Oh, thank
humility,
you.
right? You treat yourself and your guests and the way you carry yourself as an example of what it is to be a thriving, healthy person. I'm sure that you got your own demons, but like you mentioned, like you said, it's like we have to have that positive self-talk and be motivated in that discipline of the mind. And through your actions, it just shows that you're there, especially at so young. Like it's awesome. You're blossoming into something powerful.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate how you mentioned that, yes, I do have my own demons, because I think it's easy, like, for people to see whoever it is they like look up to or see as an example and be like, oh my gosh, they just like have it all together. They, nothing hard is going on. But like, as you know, like, it's not about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to it, but also who you become despite that. And I just think that's always a choice. It's always a choice how you carry yourself, what attitude you have, your mindset, and having the perspective that, or I guess I carry the perspective that what I've been through um, was given to me as an opportunity to create change and impact other people's lives. It could be, oh my gosh, like, woe is me, being a victim mentality, which I did actually do that for a long time, mostly through like dismissing what I had been through. Like, I was just like, yeah, this is, I was molested for 9 years by my dad, and like that's just what life was, and so yeah, like it's fine. But only when I started actually diving into that and doing the work of being like, oh, actually, I'm not fine. So because I'm showing up in this way and it's impacting these people around me. So only when I really dove into that did I allow myself to blossom into a person that could hold space for the heaviness and the light,
Yeah,
because
that's
you
beautiful.
gotta, thank you. Yeah, you gotta allow that darkness and hold space for it, but not let it consume you. And I think, what you guys are doing with the I Am mission is a beautiful representation of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's you're like a perfect example of a saying that we say in the I Am mission quite a bit, and that there is strength and courage and vulnerability. And I think like when you learn to accept and embrace your experiences, it's not about being a victim because that's totally separate. You could feel you're sorry for yourself, but acknowledging the things you went through and giving yourself grace and saying, hey, there is something I need to unpack, and this is how I'm going to do it. Right? It's tough. Many
Mm-hmm.
people they try to put this persona of strength and like nothing. These emotions don't bother me, and ultimately what we're doing is you're just following them in the back of your head. So one day, like a soda bottle, it's going to shake and it's going to pop, and guess what? The victims from that outburst is going to be your children, your family, the relationships that you need to nurture, and ultimately you're going to isolate yourself. And then it gets to that perpetual cycle of depression, negativity, and that self-doubt that limits everybody's potential.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to the identity piece that you brought up, when you stay stuck identifying with the pain and with the past stories that you went through, you're never going to know who you really are as long as you're identifying with the past or your pain or fear,
Yeah.
whatever it is. That's not actually you. So
Yeah.
it's so important to invest in mentors, coaches, experiences, things that allow you that space to truly reflect and see which parts of me are me and what parts is it time to let go of, like you were talking about before. Time to let it go. It's time to move on. Hold on to something else.
Well, what's interesting is that like if we are always focused on the future, like what's to come tomorrow and the next day, and there's a difference between planning and constantly worrying about something. You're always in a state of anxiety and uncertainty because we don't know what the future holds. And if you're ever thinking about the past, you're more than likely in a negative way. There's a lot of guilt and regret that's associated with that, right? But it's not until you understand the importance of being present and the now and being able to look at your emotions and your experience objectively so you could create a plan, of a healthy response to those events. Until you do that, you're going to be stuck in that perpetual rut of repeated mistakes and bad thinking. And I always like to say, it's absolutely true, Jess. Our pain is fertile ground for purpose. And I think when people realize that, hey, you can acknowledge your pain without feeling sorry for yourself. You can acknowledge your pain and then use that as fuel to motivate you to be a better person, to help others, right? To be that example that you needed when you were in that state. So well said, sister.
Thank you. I need to write down something you just said because that was really good. I had thought earlier about how like presence plus pressure equals purpose. So then you're talking about the pain and the perspective. So I think it's the pain and the perspective ties into like how you respond to that pressure, which then in the end it really helps you tap into your purpose.
I was gonna ask you, do you believe in synchronicities?
Oh yeah,
Right? Like I
yeah.
started I started believing in synchronicities, like the universe is speaking, like speaking to you, right? I think I seen some actor say this, but it's absolutely true, and stuck in my head. Is that life is coming from you. It's not coming at you. Like literally the way that you think and you carry yourself will dictate how your life unfolds. Again, your thoughts are seeds that blossom into action, and the quality of your life is dependent on the quality of your decisions, right? And so it's like it's very important for us to understand how our mindset can impact us on the back end. Absolutely.
What would your 10-year-old self say to you, and what would you say to your 10-year-old self?
Definitely wasn't expecting that question. But it's a good question, man. Honestly, if there's anything I could say to my 10-year-old self, honestly, I would just give him a hug, hold him. My dad was in prison my entire life, and my mom and my grandmother raised me, but they were always working. So technically, my older sister raised me. And, in my head, as I grew up, I realized, especially under the medicine, that I had this belief that maybe they didn't love me. And it's like I would give my 10-year-old self a hug and say, you are worth it and you're enough, and with that, I kind of being a father. We didn't talk about it much, but being a father is the most important and joyful chapter of my life so far. I have a wonderful wife. My 17-year-old is a freaking phenomenal stud. And then my 3-year-old, and I look at my 3-year-old and how difficult and emotional he is. And everybody says he's just like me, right? And it reminds me that he is my teacher for patience. My 3-year-old is teaching me patience because if he was like me when I was younger, and I remember how I got abused and I got put to the side because I was too much to handle, just all over the place, right? I could understand that a child would be hurt with parents that don't see or value, the child for who they are, or understand how their reactions to the child's behavior will impact it on the back end. So my 10-year-old self, I would just say you're worth it, your love, and hold them and give them a strong home.
Thank you for sharing that. What do you think he would say to you if he saw you today?
If there was another person, I would
But
say,
yeah,
oh,
if your 10-year-old self saw you.
oh, dude, it's funny. The way that I carry myself is I try to be the hero in my own movie, right? I do affirmation, meditations, but most importantly, I try to be the father that I needed as a child, right? So with that being said, my 10-year-old will look at me and say, man, that guy's a badass and he's a fucking awesome dad. And that's exactly what I strive for. I want my children to remember me as an awesome father. And so everything I do, it's healing, right? I'm giving my children the experiences that I wish I had when I was a child.
That's beautiful. It just shows how much work that you've done, how much time you've spent reflecting and choosing to be better and be different. So thank you. Yeah. I had a moment where I was remembering when I was like I don't know 18, 19. I had a job as a medical courier. I'd drive around and pick up blood and urine samples and just listen to this podcast where this guy interviewed a lot of other guys with their stories, and a lot of them were veterans, and I just thought it was so fascinating to like hear stories from like high caliber men, because I obviously didn't have that in my life, and so I learned a lot about what a good strong man is through that podcast. And I was just thinking about how this is probably one that I would have listened to while I was driving around. So thank you for being you and showing up and sharing your story. I really respect and value who you are as a person.
I appreciate it, Jess. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me and having this conversation. Definitely to the point of synchronicity, right? I've been a lot healthier this year. The only limitation to me training jujitsu now is my time, my bandwidth with, having a day job as well as running the IA mission, having children at home. But you're a reminder, as many others, right? There's the head owner of Artisan Jiu-Jitsu. His son is on the same team my son is. Camelback High School is on. And so just meeting these jujitsu people back to back to back, it's a synchronicity saying, hey, man, you kind of need to go back and kind of close that chapter. You didn't end that chapter the way that you needed to. And so with that being said, I want to tell you, thank you for having me. Thank you for giving this platform to many of us to share our voice that could potentially carry words that people need to hear. And most importantly, I'll see you on the mat soon. I hope to
Yay.
get along with you and Brian, correct? Alex. I was gonna say Alex. You and Alex, and I just want to say thank you for being an inspiration and keep killing it, sister.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ulysses. Really appreciate you and your time, and we'll put your links below for everybody to check out the IA mission and connect more with you. So, yeah, thank you for listening and hopping on, everybody, today. Really appreciate you guys, and I encourage you to share this episode with anybody who came to mind. And remember that you are worth it, and you're stronger than you think, and to keep pushing and challenging yourself, but also recognize when it's time to rest and give yourself that grace and opportunity to be still. So thank you, and we will see you on the next episode.